summarize the case for proposition, Raymond.
We all know that the justice system has many different aspects. You have aspects of punishment, you have aspects of rehabilitation, restoration, and deterrence. The point here in today's debate is to reconcile how these values actually play out and actually even out when we try to weigh them in. Because we concede in any kind of crime and punishment debate, you always have to understand the values that you need to prioritize, because it's impossible for anything in the debate to prove that all of these values actually come into play and can actually be proven to be equal. The question of this debate is the risk really worth it? Because we concede, Mr. Speaker, when you talk about uncertain devices, we'll never squirrel the motion that we'll tell you that it's 100% sure. But the question of the debate is, given that we have these four principles of justice, is the risk justified and is the risk worth it? That's why, Mr. Speaker, we concede that yes, society might be unhappy, the individual might be unhappy, but that's how the justice system works. In the same way that society might feel offended when they see someone being executed, it's a price that we have to pay when we want to deter the greater society, right? That's why, if you take a look at sensibilities, someone will have to pay the price. The question is, with the technology that is so advanced, guys, I'm just starting, I'm so excited. With the technology that is so advanced, why is it not good for the justice system to be dynamic and to adapt and co-opt this kind of technology? Because we concede, yes, the government has a moral obligation not just on the society, but also on the individual. But the question is, Mr. Speaker, if it's only about the individual not being able to prove himself, how we already told you what the individual can actually do so as well. That's why we need to get warrants as well. We need to establish the high likelihood. We are not talking about random people who just like, according to Shafiq, I also want to kill people, and that happens to many people. Of course, if it's just a common thing, it's not as if we're gonna jail them. We're talking about high likelihood, which is why the technology is very important. We will never defend like those random offenses that we think, oh, you actually said you want to kill him. Because if that were the case, I will probably go to jail because of so many people that I want to kill. That is not the debate. They need to engage us on a very difficult stance wherein you have a very high likelihood of the crime from happening. And why is that? That despite the high likelihood, we will not do it. Two issues of today's debate. First is on the issue of the justice system. What really is best for the justice system? I'll take that in the first. Second is, what really is the best for the individual? Let's take a look at the first one. The first attack was, well, if the means are corrupted, it means to say that the ends are corrupted as well. So it's wrong to punish people based on action. We should punish people based on action and not based on intention. That's not necessarily true. Status quo already shows you on how we can actually do this as well, as long as we can establish that kind of level of acceptance or credibility. That's why, for example, we have attempted murder, right? Even if there's no actionable harm yet, like I haven't actually touched Imran or I haven't really pointed a gun at Imran, but they see my computer, for example, and they see like all my records, they see like testimonies or blog entries that I want to kill Imran. The state wouldn't jail me for murder, but the state has a right to detain me for actually having the likelihood to do murder. That means to say, Mr. Speaker, that I'm not being punished for the crime that I haven't committed yet, but society and status quo already has a right to detain me, to stop me from doing so, and maybe when Imran is already safe and the state has guaranteed that Imran is safe, maybe I would be released. That's how we do it. That's why when they try to say that, oh, the problem with criminal conspiracy is that there's no physical harm yet. That's not essentially true. The difference there, Mr. Speaker, is that when you talk about like criminal conspiracy, you already established the intention and the capacity to actually do this crime. That's why with this technology, you establish the two things, right? You establish the intention is there, and you establish that the capacity is there because of the disposition that the person has, and we think that it's something that the state should come in. That's why if you take a look at status quo, we already have this kind of space to do this preemptive justice. The problem in status quo, why we only have to stop there, is that the problem is we don't have the technology. This debate is not just about the debate of principles, because status quo already concedes our principles. This debate is about gradients as well. What is the tolerable threshold for you to accept the technology? And that has always been our stance. Given that status quo to a certain extent give us this political space, why is it wrong to extend this even further when the new technology comes in? That has always been the debate, and they are not engaging us on that level. Yes?
Under your paradigm, you're prejudicing the individual, but the victim would not get any closure because nothing is harm on him. Under ours, at least we're restoring that victim some semblance of dignity when that person is is undergoing punishment. Isn't that a better trade-off than your one?
Okay, don't be trapped with the idea that there is no closure because there's no crime yet, or there's no rehabilitation because the crime has not been committed yet. Because what do you expect us to say, like, oh, the crime has been committed? It's a truism, right? The problem here, Mr. Speaker, is that even if the closure doesn't exist yet, it's the price that we have to pay. We don't think the victims will actually value that, oh, I don't have closure right now, as long as my family is alive. Why would I even want the closure if it's being prevented anyway? If I were the individual, why would I want to be scarred first, then rehabilitated later, and then rehabilitated now, and stop in status quo? It doesn't make sense! Now, the second issue of the second issue of the individual, they said this, well, it's so harmful because you prejudice a certain individual. First response, status quo, you already do that for like attempted murderers or whatever, I've already explained it. But the second response is, we say that it's not necessarily wrong. In fact, it's even better for the individual because you advance the rehabilitative process. It's not as if it's something that's like random as well, Mr. Speaker. We say that if the government, or opposition, sorry, is saying that choice and individual agency of the individuals are so important, what is so wrong in making these individuals think about their choices more and make them be more cautious of their decisions now that they know their condition, now that they know the likely possibility that they will be involved in the crime. There is nothing wrong if you protect the choices of these individuals than to just abandon these individuals. Now we know that there's a high likelihood. We don't do anything about it. We wait for the individual to do the crime. That's even very hard because you scar him further. The problem right now is that what is the worst case scenario for our side? The worst case scenario is I might spend a couple of days in jail, like maybe 1 week, until Hong Yu and Imran are safe. But the best case scenario in our side, Mr. Speaker, is that I don't even have to be scarred for life. That's a very traumatizing experience, and I think the state has an obligation to protect me as well from myself if I cannot control myself anymore. That is the beauty of the proposal. It's a preemptive policy that not only addresses the society, but even the individual as well. But they said, well, you unleash the evil in the individual. Because maybe if you prejudice the individual will be like, oh my god, I need to be evil now because the state is saying I'm evil anyway. Isn't it better, now that the state knows that it's so easy for that individual to become evil anyway, that just because of the simple judgment based on technology, you're willing to let go of all your morals and act out the real evil that we are warning you against? We say, whether we'd rather take the risk, you'd rather be put in detention, as long as we make sure that you don't do the crime and you don't harm other people. That's why the conclusion of the case is this. We say, if you think about the justice system, it needs to be dynamic. It's already sad that in status quo, technology is not there to actually safeguard all of our interests. But if the technology is present, what is so wrong with expanding this? There are many evidence that we didn't accept in the past, but now we're accepting them because we've established their technological credibility. If this technology exists, it's worth a try, and it's the best way that we can balance the rights of the individuals and the concerns of the society. That makes the state very much effective.
I'd like to thank Raymond for that speech. To summarize the case for the opposition, Ati.
The biggest problem with the government side is that they assume that when it says very high likelihood, it's conclusive evidence. Because we believe that we're not going to be stupid enough to accept that burden, because science has its flaws. Titanic sank, but yours are in it. It's conclusive evidence, then why do you have to go to the extent of arresting him when what you can do is just guard him, Mr. Speaker? So we never really told you the burden of taking a man out of this home into prison based on something that is not conclusive. I have 3 things I want to deal with you today. Number 1, I'm going to talk about individual and societal rights and how government should regulate this relationship. Number 2, I'm going to talk about the effect on the individual that's going to be arrested. And then I'm going to show you the link why their proposal will not have that peaceful society that they so wish to achieve. Firstly, how should a government regulate relationship? Because government does not have full control over every individual, and they must only regulate certain rights that every man has. What they haven't told you is this: why does a potential harm on a person is a justification to deprive a man of his right to life and livelihood, which he deserves by virtue of him being a human being? There are certain times when we can limit rights, but what are the examples that they give you? Number 1, attempted murder. I forgive Raymond because he's not a law student. When it comes to attempted murder, you should not criminalize someone because he said, I'm going to kill Shafiq. You don't do that. You only criminalize someone for attempted murder because there's still a positive act within that particular conduct. When you, I have a knife and I'm going to a Shafiq, but the only difference is this: any And that's when the act, although it's not completed, the government still criminalizes that person. So we think that attempted murder analogy does not stand in this debate. But we think what happens under Imran's case was that a man was deprived of his father, but government has done something about it, but that is proportionate to the crime committed. Unfortunately, in Singapore, there's no death penalty, so he got life imprisonment. But in other countries, we have given proportionate punishment to the individual who has committed the crime. What happens under their proposal is this: a man will be deprived of his, a boy will be deprived of his father, although the father has not done anything at all. So that's why we think it's more harmful under their scenario. But then they said we want to create a climate of security where people can walk down the street safely. Number one, they haven't told you why status quo is insufficient. Because if a preventive measure is sufficient, then people would feel psychologically safe to be in a particular area. I feel safer to be in London than I am in Malaysia, for example, because it's all a psychological state of mind. If there's enough prevention, if there's enough patrol cars, I will feel safe, definitely. So what they never engage to you is a kind of climate of fear that you will instill within society under our proposal. You, me, and everyone else in this room has a probability of committing a crime because there's a statistic that shows I will do so. That's when every single individual fears that the government might knock on their door and say, you're going to commit rape, I shall arrest you now. So that's kind of climate of fear that is existing within your proposal. Sit down. Then lastly, Imran talked to you about this idea of omission. He says that if the government doesn't do anything about it, then it's a form of omission. That's also another misconception of the concept of law, because number one, omission is when you don't do anything at all about it and something happens. For example, if a man drowns and you don't do anything at all to save him, then the government can be punished for it. But the government has done a lot of things in order to preventive methods, in order to prevent people from committing crime, by providing a lot of patrol cars, by creating laws with harsh punishment to psychologically deter people from committing that particular crime. So we don't think the government is guilty of omission at all costs, and that particular substantive was very analyzed. Second of all, so we think when it comes to regulating the relationship within society, within society, it's very more important that the government err on the side of caution by protecting the life of a man who's innocent than because just in the fact that he might commit crime.
Madam.
Sit down. Let's get this idea. Second of all, they want to protect the individuals that might commit the crime. He said that we want to guard him from the consequences of his act, but they never really told you what were the consequences of his act. That was because it was a one-liner. But Shafiq already told you there were a lot of consequences on that individual if you carry out this proposal. For substantive, that was never responded by the whip speaker. Number one, Shafiq told you when you accept the idea that you are a criminal by nature because I have statistic on you, although morally you think you're religious and you're someone who's incapable of doing something bad, you're now distorting his principles because now he thinks I am someone who is incapable of murder. So that's a form of psychological torture, or you accept, or you change, or you tap into the basic evil instinct of that particular human being. And that is harmful. We also told you people will retaliate because the government is too strong on them, but the government does not allow any form of liberty to exist because based on likelihood you will be arrested. But what they never engaged you with this idea of the human element, of how people may change. I might be religious now, but I might not be in the future. Because of the fact that I have not met my wife who cheated on me, him, for example, that's when we think that you still need to take into consideration of those other probabilities, for example. Because they said that look, rehabilitation is very important, but a person cannot recontemplate his actions because he did not know that he did something wrong. This is the kind of psychological trauma that when you put an innocent man in prison in status quo. These are the kind of psychological effects that you have, and we don't think, on the balance of probability, we think we're protecting individuals more than they are because they never told you what is the significant benefit that you'll get out of their proposal. Yes?
If you were going to be murdered, which would you prefer? For the state to stop that murder or for the state to provide closure subsequent to your murder?
I think the state should prevent it if it includes evidence that I will definitely get killed, for example. But we think if just because Shafiq is angry at me and there's a probability that he'll do it, I don't think it's right for you to take away his right as a man. Let's look at this last idea. Why would their proposal create a safe haven for every human being? It's because of the fact that there's still a court procedure when it comes to getting a warrant of arrest. They said that look, the standard is beyond reasonable doubt. That is a very high standard that's imposed on criminal justice system. That is, what you need to prove is that there's no doubt that that man will definitely commit a particular crime. So they even considered that when it comes to the court, there's a battle of evidences. So when the prosecution has a basis statistic that this guy might commit a crime, on the other hand, a person is a priest or a mother of two or a student like me, the evidence of good character that I have will still overweigh the kind of statistics that they have. So at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to detain these people because you still need a warrant of arrest at the end of the day. But furthermore, even if you will get certain warrant, we think you will substantially affect people with bad character. People with bad character are not necessarily evil persons. You might be a grumpy old man, but it doesn't mean you will commit theft in the future. So this is why we think you distinctively discriminate people on their kind of character that they have, because we think people change. The criminal justice system in status quo takes into consideration that we have human element that every individual change, because certain factor happens at a different part of life. Maybe I will not commit crime now because I have not met the person who will make me want to kill him, for example. So at the end of the day, we think preventive measure is sufficient in status quo. You see how in Western nations, crime rate is lower than in developing nations because of the kind of policies that government have. We think status quo is sufficient. We don't think we need to go to the extent of relying on probabilities. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Atik for that speech, and I'll speak from both sides. I'd now like to once again recognize Eric, who gives a reply.
Mr. Speaker, in order to evaluate this debate, there are two elements which should be considered, two ingredients which should be considered. First is the essence of this proposal. Is it fair or is it not fair to preemptively imprison an individual before he committed a crime? Secondly is the consequences, the corollaries of this proposal, whether or not it's positive or negative. Before that, Mr. Speaker, I would like to use the Occam's razor once again to disprove a few assumptions and analogies that they brought up in this debate. Because it gives us analogies such as criminal conspiracies and attempted murder to justify their case by saying just because this person had a certain intention, therefore he deserves to be locked up. But we told you that even within these analogies themselves, there are elements of conduct, there are elements of preparation to substantiate the imprisonment of that individual. We brought you analogies such as criminal negligence, where the action alone is more important than the intention, no matter what intention that person has, to prove that that action is the one which merits a person's imprisonment. First issue, the essence. Is it fair to imprison a person before he commits a certain crime? Now, the philosophical understanding coming from side government is that whatever needs to be done must be done in the interest of protecting society, protecting an individual's life, and that should be the sole role of the government, the moral obligation of the government. But here's where they messed up. What's the standard of view protecting society when there are other considerations, such as the life of an innocent, within this debate? Because you cannot argue protection of society in a vacuum without considering that other people will be prejudiced as well. And this is what we brought. Because we told you that under status quo there are reactive measures, such as imprisonment, like punishment once you commit a crime, and there are also preventive measures such as deterrence, which are psychological in nature, to deter someone from committing a crime. But what's more, the objective standard that we employ to imprison a person has always been the harm principle. Whenever you commit harm to another person, then you will be imprisoned. And the type of harm that they tried to push within this debate is something which, is intangible. It is only based on intention and a presumption that a person would do it under their model. A person has not been harmed, yet a person has already been imprisoned. So in essence, that's the problem with their case. But moreover, like we told you that elements such as retribution, you're inflicting disproportionate harm towards an individual. You are, and the elements of closure will not be existed within that side of the debate. They told you that what's important is to give rehabilitation. Once you imprison a person, you afford the opportunity to rehabilitate him, and maybe he might turn a good leaf. We told you, Mr. Speaker, rehabilitation is ineffective when a person has not committed a crime because he's incapable of recontemplating what he did wrong because he didn't do anything in the first place. So he'll forever be perpetuated in that thinking of what I did wrong, when in fact he didn't do anything wrong at all. But we further substantiated on how, and we brought a Hobbesian characteristic of an individual, how you're tapping into a person's baser instinct to do evil if you inflict a certain form of evil, in a sense punishment, before he committed a crime at all. So essentially, you are the one who's instigating him to do the crimes in the future because he's angry at the state before he did anything wrong at all. Thirdly, right, it's the consequences, the corollary of the proposal. Because we were the one who talked about the social ramifications of this debate. We were the one who talked about a society which is premised on a climate of fear, which is paranoid and goes on the zero tolerance policy, detaining anyone first, without any objective and clear standards beside on your fantasy beyond reasonable doubt, getting a court ruling that you talked about. They need to prove with us how intention is that severe that which warrants a person to be imprisoned. They told you, Mr. Speaker, that omission and complicity is something which the state does. But in essence, you're also committing omission against the person who is prejudiced, and you're complicit in imprisoning him as well. We attacked you on the practicalities, and we gave you cogent reasons, such as how future is not predetermined, and how you are able to protect the victim instead of imprisoning the accused. We don't think that is fair. That's why Minority Report is on our side. You should be on our side.
I don't know what the hell Acon's razor was, because unlike Ari, I didn't read the word of the day today. But this is what the debate is about. I would like to live in a world where there's no such thing as, murder, robbery, rape, kidnapping, and all these bad things. And if for the first time ever, we can get our hands on a piece of technology that can help us expunge all these things. And all it takes is for us to detain an individual for a couple of days. What's so wrong about that? And that was the principal argumentation coming from this side of the house, right? So what basically went on in the past, 1 hour? First, they tried to pin us to this argument that, none of the evidence is conclusive. Like, guys, we're not going to just surf Facebook, Control F, kill, rape, and plunder, and then capture the people that we find ourselves on, right? Clearly what we're going to do is that the evidence that we're going to have, be able to predict with a high degree of certainty that a crime is going to occur. Like, if really what we're supposed to defend is Facebook, then it's Kate's fault, yeah? But it's not, right? That's where the presumption for this debate to even occur in the first place. So if you do agree that everybody has a statistic in their head, that everybody wants to kill everybody else, obviously these are not the people that we're going to target, right? Because then everybody moots everybody else out. We're going to target the people who are probably going to commit a crime, and that's where these arguments come in. So when did the actual reasonable and sensible arguments come in now? We argued that there is a moral and principal obligation on our side of the house. We argued firstly that if you are in possession of a piece of information that is important, you act on it. We're not asking for much more than that. What was the response? Nothing. Second, we argued, look, we're doing this in status quo anyway, right? We have crimes or criminal conspiracy. The only thing they tried to do was, but there was a physical element involved. Look, all they required was intention and capacity, and if to approximate the possibility of that crime happening. If you can determine that the crime will happen anyway, why do you need these things? We are merely going with what the law already says. Thirdly, in a society of free choice, people are going to make wrong choices, people are going to make bad choices. If the state can step in and protect people who don't consent to the consequences of these bad choices, what's wrong with that? They never give a response. Lastly, the idea that rights are relational. That's never absolute. As much as it's not happy for you to be detained for a couple of days, it's fine if it serves the greater good, never responded to by the other side. What did they say? They said, look, you're irresponsible, he's a guilty man. No, he's an innocent man. We do agree that it might be irresponsible to some degree, but it will be even more irresponsible of us to let that man free and commit that crime and foist harm upon another individual. Never responded to by that side of the house. Not only with that, they went on this bloody rampage about how there's closure and you need proportionality. Hell, the reason why the victim doesn't have closure in our side of the house is because the victim in this instance is actually alive. He doesn't actually need closure because he's not bloody dead. And we think that's especially important coming from our side of the house. Then we also argue that it's fair, right? You wait up. For a couple of days you're in jail, I make sure that I keep a family intact. I make sure that people are alive. I make sure that you get to keep your property. Guys, wait up, it's quite clear that we're far more reasonable. Then you try to call this harangue, right? We're better, you're doing harm to the individual. Because right now what's going to happen, right, is that as you detain him, this is the logic, right? Oh no, I'm going to kill someone. Wait, that means I must kill someone. That's the argument coming from that side of the house, right? But we think it's worse when you allow the guy, a good Muslim, right, to go out there, actually stab someone a couple of times, and then, oh my bloody hell, I just killed someone. That's far worse for the individual than actually detaining him for a couple of days. Not only that, what do we argue here? We argue that he's actually going to be psychologically benefited from it, right? Because we're protecting him from committing the kind of acts that will force psychological harm upon himself. They will cause him to regret for the rest of his life. Never corresponded to by that side of the house. The final throw of the dice coming from them is going to be a state of fear, right? You're going to be Stalin and you're going to capture everyone and throw them into jail. Guys, we're not going to be so bloody random. What we're going to do is that we're only going to capture people who have a high possibility of actually committing a crime, right? If you need evidence, we'll show you the evidence. Recognizing there's a reasonable nexus, people won't live in fear. But not only that, which would you prefer, right? To know and understand On one hand, that the state will capture people who might commit crimes, or the possibility that I wake up one morning and Raymond Vittorio suddenly and randomly stabs me in the stomach for I don't know what good reason whatsoever. We think the climate of fear is better on our side of the house as well. And last point about, how the state becomes complicit, she basically proves my point. The state becomes complicit because it's not doing anything at all. For these reasons, I'm extremely proud to win this debate.